Night falls slowly over the Aegean Sea. The water is calm, the horizon is empty, and beneath the surface there is no light at all. In this darkness, there are no witnesses, no headlines, no cameras, only steel and silence. In January of 1942, a British submarine entered these waters and never returned. No distress call was heard, no explosion was recorded, no bodies were recovered. The Royal Navy would list her as missing, presumed lost. Her name was HMS Triumph. For 80 years, she remained one of Britain's most enduring wartime mysteries, not because she was sunk in a great battle, but because she disappeared while fighting a war that officially did not exist. A war of shadows and a war of secrets. A war where success was never announced and failure was never explained. HMS Triumph did not die in the open ocean under enemy guns. She vanished while slipping spies into occupied territory, while supporting resistance movements, while sailing missions whose details were sealed, even from history. When she failed to return, there were no answers, only questions. Did she strike a mine? Was she ambushed? Was she betrayed? The Aegean Sea kept its secret. Decade after decade passed. The war ended. Empires collapsed. Nations rebuilt. But somewhere beneath the waves, HMS Triumph remained exactly where she fell. Upright, intact, and silent. Waiting. HMS Triumph was a T-class submarine, designed in the late 1930s when Britain understood that the next war would be fought not just on the surface, but below it. She was long, heavily built, capable of extended patrols in hostile waters. Her pressure hull was thick steel. Her propulsion came from diesel engines on the surface and electric motors beneath it. When submerged, she could become nearly invisible, moving silently through the sea like a predator. Her weapons were simple and deadly: torpedoes, deck guns, stealth. But a submarine was only as effective as the men inside her. HMS Triumph carried officers and sailors who lived in constant confinement, men who slept inches from torpedoes, men who breathed recycled air for days at a time, men who knew that a single mistake could flood the boat and kill everyone within minutes. There was no escape hatch to safety. There was no rescue if something went wrong. Yet they sailed anyway. By the early years of the war, Triumph had already proven herself. She conducted patrols against Axis shipping. She stalked enemy convoys. She survived depth charge attacks that turned the sea above her into a boiling cauldron of steel and pressure. But in the Mediterranean, the war was changing. Axis forces had seized Greece. German aircraft dominated the skies. Italian and German naval patrols controlled the coastlines. Traditional naval warfare became increasingly dangerous. And so Britain turned to another weapon: secrecy. In July 1940, Britain created a new organization with a deliberately vague mission statement: the Special Operations Executive. SOE was tasked to do one thing: set Europe ablaze. Its agents were not soldiers in uniform. They were saboteurs, organizers, radio operators, assassins. They were sent behind enemy lines to build resistance networks, sabotage railways, destroy fuel depots, and keep occupied nations fighting from within. But SOE faced a critical problem. How do you insert agents into territory controlled by the enemy? Aircraft were vulnerable. Surface ships were too visible. Submarines became the answer. And HMS Triumph was chosen. Her role changed. She no longer hunted only ships. She became a ghost transport. At night, she would surface close to hostile shores. Her engines would fall silent. Rubber boats would be inflated on deck. Men carrying radios, explosives, forged documents, and cyanide pills would slip into the water. Some would never return. HMS Triumph delivered agents to the Greek resistance. She evacuated stranded operatives. She moved people whose existence was officially denied. Every mission increased the risk. The Aegean Sea was heavily mined. German aircraft patrolled relentlessly. Coastal observers watched for any sign of movement. One mistake, one radio transmission intercepted, one unexpected patrol, and the submarine would be destroyed without warning. Yet Triumph kept sailing. Each mission added to her legend and to her danger. By January 1942, she was tasked with another covert operation, one that would become her last. She sailed from Alexandria into the Aegean Sea. She sent routine signals. Nothing indicated trouble. Then, silence. No return. No explanation. Only an empty sea. January 1942. The Mediterranean winter was unforgiving. Cold winds swept across the Aegean, whipping the surface into restless waves. Below the sea was a labyrinth of danger. German and Italian forces had turned the region into a killing ground. Minefields were laid indiscriminately, not only to stop warships, but to trap submarines that dared to slip through narrow channels. Aircraft patrolled daily, scanning for periscopes, oil slicks, or the faint wake of a submerged hull. Coastal observation posts watched the horizon, alert for any sign of movement. This was the environment HMS Triumph entered on her final patrol. She sailed from Alexandria with orders that were deliberately vague. Only a handful of officers knew the full details. Her task was covert. She was to deliver agents to occupied Greece, men trained to organize resistance, gather intelligence, and sabotage German infrastructure. It was not a combat patrol. It was something far more dangerous, because combat offered warning. Covert warfare did not. As Triumph moved northward, she transmitted routine position updates. Nothing in her signals suggested trouble. To the outside world, everything appeared normal. But normal did not exist in the Aegean. The sea lanes she crossed were threaded with mines. Many uncharted, many laid hastily, many drifting from their original positions. A single contact could tear open a pressure hull in seconds. If that happened, there would be no time. No mayday, no controlled surfacing, no escape. At some point after her final transmission, HMS Triumph vanished. There was no radio call reporting an attack, no request for assistance, no indication she even knew danger was near. She simply did not return. When HMS Triumph failed to arrive back at base, concern spread quickly. Submarines were expected to run silent for long periods. Delays were not uncommon. At first, commanders waited, then days passed, then weeks. No signals were received, no sightings reported, no debris found. Eventually, the words were written into official logs: missing, presumed lost. For the Admiralty, it was a grim but familiar phrase. For the families, it was devastating. There was no funeral, no confirmed date of death, no location to mourn, only absence. Wives waited for letters that never came. Parents clung to hope that silence meant survival. And children grew up without knowing where their fathers lay. Because Triumph had been on secret missions, details were withheld. Families were told little, sometimes nothing at all. Even after the war ended, the full truth remained sealed. Rumors filled the vacuum. Some believed she had been sunk by enemy aircraft. Others suspected a mine. A few whispered darker possibilities: betrayal, intercepted landings, compromised agents. But there was no evidence. The sea offered none. As years turned into decades, HMS Triumph faded from public memory. But she was never forgotten by those who waited. For historians, HMS Triumph became a footnote, a single line in naval records. Lost, cause unknown, crew presumed dead. But beneath that line was an unanswered question. What happened? The Aegean Sea had swallowed hundreds of ships over thousands of years. Ancient triremes, medieval galleys, modern warships. Its seabed was layered with history. Finding one submarine among them seemed impossible. Yet the mystery endured. Because Triumph was not just another wartime loss. She represented a hidden war. One fought without recognition, without medals, without public victory. The men she carried were not meant to be remembered. The missions she sailed were not meant to be recorded. And so the silence continued. Until technology advanced, until sonar improved, until researchers returned to the old patrol routes with new tools and old questions. Somewhere in the Aegean, HMS Triumph still lay, upright, intact, waiting. In the 21st century, the tools of exploration finally caught up with the questions of history. Advanced sonar systems began to sweep the Aegean seabed with unprecedented clarity. Remotely operated vehicles could descend where divers never could. Old wartime charts were re-examined. Forgotten patrol routes traced again. And in 2022, something appeared on the screen. a long, unmistakable shape, cylindrical, metallic, too symmetrical to be rock. As the remotely operated vehicle descended, the outline sharpened. A pressure hull, a conning tower, a submarine. She was sitting upright on the seabed, perfectly balanced, undisturbed. There was no debris field scattered across the seafloor, no evidence of violent breakup. She looked almost peaceful. As the camera moved closer, identification became undeniable. The shape of the bow, the arrangement of the hydroplanes, the silhouette known to naval historians. This was HMS Triumph. After 80 years, she had been found. The submarine rested as if still on patrol, her hull intact, her form unbroken, her presence haunting. Inside, her crew remained where they had last stood, slept and worked. The sea had preserved her in silence. With the wreck located, historians and naval experts began examining the evidence. There were no signs of torpedo impact, no shell damage, no evidence of prolonged pursuit. Instead, the damage pointed to something sudden, a naval mine, likely contact-triggered, possibly magnetic. One moment of contact would have been enough. A mine detonating against the hull would have caused catastrophic flooding within seconds, especially in confined compartments. Electrical systems would fail instantly. Control surfaces would be disabled. There would be no time to surface, no time to send a distress signal, no time to escape. The submarine would simply stop. The fact that HMS Triumph rests upright suggests she may have been moving slowly, perhaps approaching a landing site, perhaps navigating carefully through mined waters. Her crew would have felt the shock, then darkness, pressure, silence. Death would have come quickly. There was no suffering prolonged by hope, no waiting for rescue that would never arrive. The sea claimed her in an instant, and then for 80 years, nothing disturbed her rest. Today, HMS Triumph is recognized not as a wreck, but as a war grave. She is not salvaged. She is not disturbed. She remains where she fell. Her steel hull now belongs to history. Her crew belongs to memory. They were sailors who fought a war most people never saw. Men who delivered resistance fighters into occupied lands. Men who sailed knowing their missions might never be acknowledged. They did not seek recognition. They did not leave memoirs. They simply did their duty and vanished. HMS Triumph did not explode in a blaze of glory. She did not die in a great naval battle. She disappeared quietly, carrying secrets that were never meant to be spoken. And perhaps that is why her story endures. Because some sacrifices are made in silence. Some wars are fought in shadows. And some heroes rest where only the sea remembers them. For 80 years, HMS Triumph lay unseen. Now she has been found. Not to be raised, not to be changed, only to be remembered.